Whenever the sound is fine, you can roll the music. We'll wait. In the meantime, please enjoy the flowers, the beautiful floral arrangements that we have here. They were sent by our fans, a.k.a. Chris's mom.
Yeah.
She did a good job. She picked some nice ones. It's a show about medicine.
But the show won't give you autism.
The guy you just heard is Dr. Christopher Labos.
And the other guy is Jonathan Jarry. He's not a doctor.
Hey, I'm sorry if I didn't go to med school.
Well, I did. And we're going to look at the evidence behind medical topics. And the show is
Wait. No, I want to say it. I want to say it.
No, I want to say it.
I want to say it. I came up with it. It's the body of
evidence.
It's the body of evidence.
You totally stole that from Madonna.
Welcome to Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis. No, actually, this is the Body of Evidence, people. The Body of Evidence Symposium edition. We are here as part of the Trottier Public Science Symposium in downtown Montreal, and I am joined, as always, by Dr. Christopher Labos, cardiologist, medical journalist, and prepubescent Doogie Howser.
And I actually have no idea who this man is. Security! Security!
Are we really doing this now?
Yes, we are. Yes. All right.
It's ridiculous. Okay, I have a name.
You do?
I do. Please tell them my name.
Sitting right here next to me is Jonathan Jarry, medical scientist, podcaster, internet aficionado, and person who explains to me what Twitter is on a daily basis.
Yes, and also Stitcher, which is not the same as Grindr.
Right. Apparently.
So what is the Body of Evidence?
So the Body of Evidence is a podcast that we run that tries to explore medical topics and look actually at the evidence behind many of the claims. So does red wine actually prevent heart disease? Is chocolate good for you? And today we're going to look at three very special topics.
Yeah, and we're going to do something a little bit different today because we're here at the symposium. We have some amazing experts in town, and so we will look at three different topics and we will interview these people on these topics. And, it's sad, but we usually have Joseph Hackle. If you listen to the podcast, Joseph Hackle is our jingle meister. He was supposed to be here in the flesh today. He couldn't make it, but he pre-recorded the jingles for us, so you guys will be treated to the same. If you listen to the podcast, you'll get to hear those jingles as well. So what I really want to talk about today is trust in science. And that was to be the original theme for the symposium, and I think it's a good one to explore. There was a poll in the United Kingdom, 1,700-something people in 2014 that were polled. 1 in 5 admitted to not knowing what scientists do. Chris also doesn't know what scientists do, but
I have no idea what you do on a daily basis
either. That's a different story. But that's a bit. So 20% of Brits were ready to say that they have no idea what scientists do. So lack of knowledge is one thing, but then there's lack of trust, and does one follow from the other? I mean, it's easy to perceive the situation as being dire. I mean, we live in our little bubbles. We read a lot about pseudoscience. We read a lot about anti-this movement, anti-that movement. So it's easy for us to say that we're living in an anti-science age, but are we really? Is the situation as bad as we suspect? What do you say about that?
I think it's pretty bad. I mean, you just watch the news now and you just listen to what people are doing on social media. It sounds pretty terrible.
It sounds bad, but from what I could find, it doesn't look as bad as we may have portrayed it. According to a 2012 American study, for instance, that really looked at public trust in science, there has been no decline since the 1970s, except among conservatives and those who frequently attend church. There was a Quebec survey that was done this year, actually. 1,062 people answered it. And the question was very clear. In general, do you trust Quebec scientists? And 82% said yes. 9% said no. And 9% said, well, I don't want to answer, or I don't know. It's interesting that if we look at the non-Francophones, however, who answered, only 67% said yes, that they had trust in Quebec scientists. And if we go back to the UK, the poll that I mentioned earlier concluded that this trust appears to be more commonly associated with journalists and the media, and less so with scientists themselves. So I'm okay. Chris, who writes for the Gazette, less so. But when Brits were asked if scientists adjust their findings to get the answers they want, 35% of them said yes. And some scientists do, and they commit fraud. So we can argue over how trusting the population is of scientists in general, but it is clear, I think, if some of you were here last night, for instance, that certain scientific issues are more polarizing than others, and they invite a greater and more vocal amount of distrust. GMOs, for instance.
Yeah.
Right, there was a poll in Canada, a Nanos poll, 1,000 people surveyed, 26% saying they were somewhat distrustful of GMO research. And we can also see that 18% were completely distrustful of GMO research. There's a lot of red on that figure. In the United States, it's always interesting to compare what scientists will say on a particular issue and what the public actually says. And there was a AAAS Pew poll which revealed that 88% of scientists say it is safe to eat GMOs, but only 37% of US adults say the same. And the perception of knowledge seems to polarize people even more in certain cases. So out of British responders who felt well informed about the issue of GMOs, basically half said that benefits outweigh the risks, and the other half said the opposite. Then there's the topic of electromagnetic radiation. I couldn't find some good figures on this, but the CBC asked its readers in 2010 if they were concerned about Wi-Fi's potential health risks. And almost 4,000 people voiced their opinion, and over 41% said yes, they were concerned. There was a recent, you're going to love this one, there was a recent Vancouver Sun headline that showed a bit of sensationalism. I don't know if we can put it up on the screen. Parliamentary report warns cell phones and Wi-Fi a serious health issue. And then in a smaller font underneath, but several leading Canadian health experts say that cell phones and Wi-Fi devices pose less risk to humans than run-of-the-mill fevers. But if you're just going through your feed very quickly, you look at this and you think, wow, parliamentary report warns cell phones and Wi-Fi are a serious health issue.
And who's more trustworthy than politicians?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You.
Of course.
And then, of course, there's a topic of vaccination. Once again, if we look at a US poll, 86% of scientists agree that parents should vaccinate their children, but only 68% of the public is ready to admit the same. So, we're going to look at these issues with some pretty amazing people. We've got Dr. Kevin Folta, who will be talking about GMOs. We've got Dr. Geoffrey Kabat, with whom we'll talk about cell phones and power lines and Wi-Fi. And we've got Dr. Paul Offit, with whom we'll talk about vaccines. But first of all, before we bring out Dr. Paul Offit, as usual, we sent our street correspondent, Thanos Michaelopoulos, to the McGill University campus. This was the first weekend of the school year, and we asked McGill students about their thoughts on the safety of vaccines.
There's kids who might be susceptible to certain diseases, whether that's because they had another disease. Then if they hang out with other kids who didn't have the vaccine, right, then they can transmit that disease, right? And so, although it's a personal choice whether or not you want the vaccine, you have to understand that you are also putting other people at risk.
But in some way, wouldn't it be fun to get polio and have to be in like an Iron Lung and call yourself Iron Man? If you had children, would you get them vaccinated?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Definitely? Okay, you seem very quick to answer on that. You have some strong opinions about this. You obviously don't think that there's any health risks.
No. Well, my mom is the doctor, so I'm biased. But yes.
That's not a bad bias to have,
Yeah.
being healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you had a child, would you get the child vaccinated?
Yeah.
No concerns about health, autism, mercury in the vaccines, anything of the sort?
Quite frankly, in my opinion, I'd rather risk those than like the serious implications of the diseases that they're.
I know measles is making a comeback. It's pretty trendy now. Your kid could be on the trend list.
I think that's okay. I don't think I would want my kids to have to deal with measles or mumps or polio.
I personally haven't seen any proof that it leads to autism.
You don't believe Jenny McCarthy, the expert?
The expert. There's lots of experts.
Okay,
There's
yeah.
lots of experts. I've heard lots of experts speak to the contrary. I'm glad that there's one expert that can be named, but good for that one person. But I mean, it's easy to go against the status quo and become famous.
When your child is sick, you're gonna overthink everything you did, which can mean nutrition, vaccinations, and then maybe you can become a little bit paranoid. Maybe you took a wrong step and you're gonna blame yourself because your child is sick.
why are you on board? What sort of swayed you, other than growing up in a culture where it's like you just get vaccinated? Because I'm just thinking.
Because I think that the anti-vaccination reasoning is BS. I don't know. I honestly don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
like,
you can't. That works for me.
I think it's
I'm
BS.
totally happy with that. I hope we got a close-up of that.
Like,
yeah.
It's a strong opinion to say, and
Perfect.
I know clearly there's people who disagree with that, but that's my opinion, and I can't really, quite frankly, tell you what I'm basing it off of, but...
Fair enough. I like the attitude. Thank you so much for your time.
I am proud to say that we are joined by Dr. Paul Offit, the Chief of the Division of Infectious Diseases and the Director of the Vaccine Education Center at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, a professor of vaccinology and pediatrics, the co-inventor of the RotaTeq rotavirus vaccine, and the author of many books, including Deadly Choices, How the Anti-Vaccine Movement Threatens Us All, and just released Bad Faith, When Religious Belief Undermines Modern Medicine. And we have just run out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Offit, for joining us. We'll move on to the next topic. Thank you. And thank you to, welcome to Between Two Ferns. As you can see, we have a buffet over there. There's water over there for the guests. If you want to serve yourself, feel free. As you are well aware of, medical degrees are automatically granted to nervous parents who put in the word vaccine into Google. This democratization of the medical degree means that every citizen is now on equal footing with you with regards to immunology. How does it feel to be surrounded by so many peers?
Yeah, it's an honor. I mean, hopefully you're not talking about Jenny McCarthy, because she is my personal go-to person for healthcare advice.
Oh, good,
so,
good.
That's
good. Okay. I was wondering, like, the anti-vaccination movement, is this, right in 2015, a shrill minority or a sizable chunk of the American population?
It's a shrill minority. I mean, they're the mouse that roared. If you really look at people who choose not to get any vaccines, it's actually the same in your country as in our country. It's between 1.5% to 2%. Most people walk into the doctor's office and say, what vaccines am I supposed to get today? But I think the media obviously is fascinated by the man bites dog story, and that's what the anti-vaccine movement provides.
Right.
Have we seen a shift in the narrative? Because as we saw from the video, I was actually quite surprised by the results. I thought we were going to get at least a few people to say, I'm worried about vaccines and whatnot. We seem to have almost a unanimous sort of a viewpoint here that vaccines
It's
are
not scientific, though. I mean,
it's not
but we
scientific.
did try to find some anti-vaccination students, and we could.
Has the narrative shifted? Once you get people like Jimmy Kimmel and others making fun of the anti-vaccine movement, does that then shift the burden? And does it become more now mainstream to be for vaccines rather than against them?
Yes, I think two things. I think one is Andrew Wakefield, crazy as this is going to sound, was good for science. I mean, he put forth the notion that the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine caused autism. It's not just that he was wrong, he was spectacularly wrong, and he was fraudulent and wrong. And the media doesn't like a fraud, and I think they were duped by him. Secondly, you have this outbreak of measles that started in Disneyland and has now spread to 25 US states, as well as to provinces like British Columbia and Quebec, which involved more than a couple hundred people, and that scared people. There's nothing that sells like fear, and fear of the disease sells. So I think, and then lastly, I mean, when you have people like Samantha Bee on The Daily Show, or Jimmy Kimmel, or John Oliver, and others sort of taking this on, Stephen Colbert has done it a couple times. I mean, I think when if you really want to dismiss something, make a joke of it, and that's what they've done. Yeah. It's cool to be pro-vaccine.
What is the current state of religious and philosophical exemptions for childhood vaccination in the U.S. as of right now?
Right, so there are 47 states that allow for religious exemptions. There's 19 states that allow for philosophical exemptions. There's actually only 3 states that allow for neither, California, and then 2 you probably wouldn't pick, which is West Virginia and Mississippi.
Wow.
What happened in California recently?
Right, well, they were sort of the epicenter of that most recent measles outbreak, and that really served as an impetus for people in that state, public health community people in that state, to say, let's not make it where you can so easily exempt yourself from vaccines. So now, frankly, if you go to school in California, you have to have your child vaccinated.
Let's go through the main anti-vax arguments to see if you can quickly counter them. My favorite, of course, Chris knows, vaccines cause autism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what unrings the bell there. You've had probably more than 20 studies that have looked at whether measles, mumps, rubella vaccine caused autism, or thimerosal and ethylmercury containing preservative in vaccine caused autism, or too many vaccines given too soon cause autism. It's like whack-a-mole. Every time you sort of do studies to show it's not true, some other hypothesis pops up. But to be honest with you, I think until it is clear what the cause or causes of autism are, this isn't going to go away. You just keep, once you scare people, it's hard to unscare them. The analogy I make is polio. I mean, if you look at polio in the early 1900s, people blamed it on everything. Right. They blamed it on fleas and cats and organ grinders, monkeys and doctors' ears. Ice cream, yeah. Right. And then Popper and Landsteiner, isolated poliovirus, and it all went away. All that craziness went away. Same thing with diabetes. I mean, nobody knew what caused diabetes. There were all these crazy cures and crazy causes, and then Banter and Best isolated insulin, and it all went away. So I think until it's clear what the cause or causes of autism are, I think we're always going to be dealing with this.
Are you saying that science works?
I'm saying science has brought us out of the dark ages and into the age of enlightenment. We shouldn't be so quick to give it up.
You learned it first here, people, in the body of evidence. Science works. Vaccines contain antifreeze. We just want greener vaccines. What do you say to that?
Well, vaccines are green. I mean, they're made from all natural products. I mean, you could even argue mercury, which is a thimerosal. It's in thimerosal. That's derived from the Earth's crust. They're all natural.
An interesting one, the question came up last night. Vaccines can overload a child's developing immune system. Any truth to that?
None. I mean, first of all, if vaccines, which can contain maybe 150 to 155 immunological components, if that overwhelmed our immune system, the species wouldn't survive. We're confronted with far more than that. A simple common cold is a far greater challenge to the immune system than all the vaccines combined.
Vaccines don't even work. Look at the latest flu vaccine.
Yeah, well, the latest flu vaccine wasn't great. That had in the U.S., about 23% efficacy, but which is obviously not good. Typically, it's 60 to 65%. But remember, for every 10% efficacy in the U.S., that's 29,000 fewer hospitalizations. So it's still better to get a vaccine than not get one. Vaccines work. I mean, before there were vaccines, polio was a common cause of paralysis. Diphtheria was the most common cause of death in teenagers. It's not a coincidence that when we introduced those vaccines, those diseases went away. It's because of the vaccines.
Right. Why are flu vaccines more of a gamble, if you will, from year to year compared to the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, for instance?
Yeah, so measles and mumps and rubella are viruses that are stable, so they don't change from year to year. What makes flu so heinous is that it actually has the capacity to mutate from one year to the next. So a natural infection or immunization one year doesn't protect you the following year, so you have to give a flu vaccine every year. You try and predict what flu viruses are going to be circulating in North America by what's circulating in South America, and usually you're right, but you're not always right, as was true last year.
I want to know, what role does religious faith play in the anti-vaccination movement?
Right, in the U.S., a country founded on individual rights and freedoms, especially religious freedoms, we have 47 states that have religious exemptions to vaccination. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. I mean, what religion, first of all, says not to get vaccinated? The first vaccine was in 1796. I mean, the New Testament, Old Testament, and Quran were written well before that, never mentioned vaccines or predicted the existence of vaccines. So it's this sort of just vague notion of, I don't want to get it, so I'm going to hide behind religion. I mean, if religion teaches you anything, it's to care about your children, to care about the people who come in contact with your children, your community. So it seems to me like it's a profoundly unreligious act, and I wish we would had the guts to take this on.
I wanted to ask you, because we don't have mandatory vaccinations here in Canada, and even for school-age children, there's no mandatory vaccinations, although the government can send your child home if they're unvaccinated during an epidemic to protect them. Do you think we should be following the lead that California has taken in sort of removing all of these exemptions to vaccinations?
I think the answer to that question is probably yes, but I think we're going to learn from what happens in California, because either one of two things is going to happen in California. Either one, more children will get vaccinated. I think that's what's going to happen, because it's going to be very hard not to be vaccinated in California. You're going to have to homeschool your child. So that may be what happens. It may be that there are these groups of people who decide to homeschool their children, in which case you will have large clusters of children who are not vaccinated at all. That is particularly dangerous. Right. So we'll see. But I think if what we learned in California, Vermont also recently eliminated their philosophical exemption. They still have a religious exemption. So one of two things will happen in Vermont. Either more children will get vaccinated, or more children will suddenly become religious. I guess we'll see what happens. But we'll learn from that. And I think if what happens in California is that more children get vaccinated, then yes, I think we should only have medical exemptions to vaccination.
What do you think about healthcare workers? This is something that happens every year at the hospital here for everybody to get their flu vaccine. And we have these large campaigns, and they tend not to be very effective. Large segments of the healthcare workers here don't get vaccinated for the flu. And I don't think education is really going to accomplish much because I think we've sort of hit the wall there. How do you feel about mandatory vaccinations for healthcare workers?
Well, we lived through this for the last 10 years in our hospital. I mean, in the early 2000s, maybe 35% of our healthcare workers were vaccinated. By healthcare worker, I mean anybody who could walk in the room. So not just nurses and doctors and nurse practitioners, but also, you know, the unit clerks or environmental services or dietary, anybody who could walk in the room. And then we sort of launched this major sort of educational campaign to try and get people to understand what the disease was, how it was spread, and how the vaccine worked. And we had raffles, and we gave away tickets to like the Philadelphia 76ers when they still were competitive and stuff. I mean, it was good, and that got us to around 67%. Then we had a declination form that read like it should have a skull and crossbones on it, right? I know that flu can come into our hospital. I know that I can transmit as a healthcare worker flu from one person to the next. I know the person who I transmitted to may not be vaccinated because they can't be vaccinated. I know I work around a vulnerable population of hospitalized children who could catch flu and die from it, and I'm still choosing not to get vaccinated. And 20% of our healthcare workers signed that form, and then we'd had enough. We thought we'd had 2 children who died in our hospital, both little girls, both were young, neither came into the hospital with flu, both caught flu in the hospital and died. And so we thought it was not our right as healthcare workers to catch and transmit potentially fatal infections, that we have a responsibility that's greater than that, and so we mandated a flu vaccine. So in 2009, if you didn't get a flu vaccine as a healthcare worker at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, you had 2 weeks of unpaid leave to think about it. If you still didn't get a vaccine, you were fired. So we fired 9 people in 2009, and it hasn't happened since. But what we didn't allow, we obviously wouldn't allow philosophical exemption. We would have allowed, because such is the nature of life in America, we would have allowed a religious exemption. I was actually put in charge of that the first year, and I got mostly I just got a lot of notes from yoga instructors, which didn't count.
You wrote a lot of books about the anti-vaccination movement. I think you've gotten a lot of pushback from them in the past. There was a time when you were just Dr. Paul Offit and not baby-killing pharma-shill Dr. Profit. Do you remember the first time you received this kind of vitriol that is probably now part of your daily routine?
Yeah, yes, I do. I mean, it was an email that just you know, basically the usual sort of email you get, references to the devil, references to Nazis.
The usual
you know,
stuff.
I
get those daily.
The Nazi devil stuff. And
of course.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's surprising. I chose pediatrics because I love children. I chose pediatric infectious disease, frankly, because to be the real answer to that is I was in a polio ward when I was about 5 years old, and you know, so that was back in the days in the 1950s when you had basically 1 visiting hour a week, and I just looked around me and saw these children who were vulnerable and helpless and alone, and I think that's always been the image in my mind. I see children as vulnerable, and hence the interest in trying to make a vaccine that, you know, has the capacity to prevent 2,000 children from dying a day. That should make me a good guy, but you know, it somehow has made me a bad guy.
But it's not like you've had, I don't know, death threats made against you.
3. I've had 3 death threats. 3 legitimate death threats.
3 legitimate, okay. When you're at the point of counting only the legitimate ones, you know you've really made it. When we look at the body of evidence on vaccines, it's almost surprising to find out that they are safer than things people believe are innocuous. I mean, vaccines are so safe, you might even say that vaccines are safer than vitamins.
You might say it. Vaccines are, you know, safer than vitamins.
Vaccines are safer than vitamins.
Vaccines are safer than vitamins. Vaccines are safer than vitamins.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Offit. I'm just going to ask if you stick around for a few seconds. We're going to switch gears to another topic, electromagnetic radiation, cell phones, power lines, Wi-Fi. We once again sent our street correspondent, comedian Thanos Michaelopoulos, to the McGill University campus to ask students about their thoughts on, yes, and that is a picture of Chris, actually. I have a lot of pictures of Chris at home. We sent Thanos on the McGill University campus, asked them about their thoughts on electromagnetic radiation.
Okay, so do you have any concerns about Wi-Fi signals or cell phone signals in terms of your health?
I've heard a lot about them, but I don't know a lot about it.
Okay.
So the concerns I do have are based on things that I've read, but don't know whether I should believe it or not.
Well, what have you read?
That, for example, having my phone next to my bed when I sleep is bad because of the signal of my Wi-Fi that's coming into my phone, and my messages constantly uploading, and that being all next to my brain when I'm sleeping.
I was in a museum, actually, interestingly enough, and it was a propaganda museum.
and there was lots of posters from like the 80s, 90s about cell phones.
Okay.
And how they were talking about how it's microwaves that are actually cooking your brain from your phone. And my dad is an engineer. He's an electrical engineer.
Okay.
And he was laughing. He was laughing so hard. He's like, "Yeah, it'll cook your brain, guys." And he didn't explain the science to me, but I could tell it was pretty funny to him. So if someone were to say, "Yeah, no, the electrical currents are going to cook your brain," I would probably laugh at him.
Talking with a couple of future engineers here. Yeah, hopefully. Well, let's see how you do on this test.
I wasn't worried, but there's so much more like studies being done with unconclusive data, of course, but there is so much more information on that topic.
Yeah.
So I assume there's something going on.
Something. So it might be. There might be health risks from cell phones. So are you in electrical engineering?
Yes.
And this is a concern to you?
Well, it's getting there.
Really? So you might have to go into civil.
No.
No.
I'm almost done, no civil.
Okay.
Hopefully more.
Because concrete's bad. If you drop concrete on yourself, that's horrible. Tinfoil hats, for them or against them?
To wear all the time?
Yeah, to block out radio signals.
Huh. I guess it depends what the hat looks like. I don't know. I don't think I would wear it. No, I don't think so.
We are joined by Dr. Geoffrey Kabat, PhD, an epidemiologist at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx, New York. He studies lifestyle, clinical, and environmental exposures in relation to cancer and other chronic diseases. He is also the author of Hyping Health Risks, Environmental Hazards in Daily Life, and the Science of Epidemiology. Chris, you cannot answer this question. What is epidemiology? Don't go there.
Don't go there?
What are you doing with your cell phone?
I'm live tweeting the event.
Why are you? We're on stage. Why are you tweeting?
I'm
Put your
tweeting.
phone away. It's gonna
No,
give
but
you cancer or
no.
something.
I thought they're supposed to be about cell phones.
No,
No,
put it
so I
away.
brought my
Put it
cell
away,
phone. I
put it on
wanted to
vibrate.
ask if the cell phone causes cancer. That's why I brought it. And you were blabbing on, so I started live tweeting, as any rational person would do in this situation.
Put the phone away.
Okay.
All right, we have people
All
here.
right.
So what is epidemiology?
Epidemiology is the study of the distribution of diseases in different populations, and in conjunction with the occurrence of disease, looking at factors that might explain the occurrence of disease.
I wouldn't try to explain it too hard. I explain it to him every day, and he still doesn't get it, so it's fine. Don't worry
I
so
also
much.
don't get cardiology. It tells me there's a pump in my chest. It moves stuff around. I
That
don't
thing
get it.
beating in your heart, that's what I take care
I
of.
don't get it.
Okay.
How did you end up writing for Forbes?
Good question.
Let's go down
Interesting
memory
question.
lane.
I was interested in a number of these topics that keep coming up in the news. Some of the examples are cell phones, BPA, how much of a threat is passive smoke exposure to us. This has been something that I have unfortunately tackled. It's like tackling religion or something. And
You've opened a Pandora's box.
And right, you're opening a Pandora's box. So I knew some journalists, some outstanding science journalists in New York and elsewhere, who wrote very lively, very witty articles for Forbes. And so I
You thought I can do
had
this
the
as
urge
well.
I like to write. I had the urge to try my hand at it, and I sent an article and got it published in Slate. And one of my these journalists said, "Boy," said Kabat is unbelievable, because he had tried to get an article published in Slate himself, a veteran journalist. I was just lucky.
All right.
And I had an interesting topic.
What is non-ionizing radiation?
Okay, let's start with ionizing radiation.
Sure, yes. Let's go for the threatening stuff.
What we're talking about is frequency and the span of the electromagnetic spectrum, which ranges from cosmic rays at the highest frequency, and frequency translates into the energy delivered by those waves or particles. And And in between is lower down, you get to X-rays, and you get to ultraviolet light. That
whole
segment
region
of the spectrum is ionizing radiation. Basically what that means is that those photons, those particles, can damage the molecules in your body. They can knock
and I like
pieces of DNA.
I like
out.
my DNA, and I want to keep it intact.
But that sort of damage can lead to cancer.
Right.
So that's ionizing.
But below those frequencies, if we go below the visible spectrum and we get into radio frequencies, for instance, this is what we refer to as non-ionizing radiation. Is there a mechanism by which we know non-ionizing radiation could affect living cells and potentially lead to cancer?
No, and one has to appreciate the vast intervening gap in the amount of energy that these microwaves and radio frequency waves carry. And it's orders and orders of magnitude. We're talking about millions of times weaker. So, okay, so it can't, this energy cannot knock electrons out of molecules in your body.
But if I put my cat in the microwave oven, bad things are going to happen.
Yeah, because
why are you putting your cat on the microwave oven?
I'm a scientist. I experiment.
I don't think you should be experimenting with your cat.
Yeah,
well, I no longer have a cat.
Well, there we go.
I have a
Cause
good
and
quote
effect.
about microwave ovens, but we can save.
We'll save it for a future episode. In 2011, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, classified radio frequency electromagnetic fields as, quote, possibly carcinogenic to humans. And this makes for very scary headlines in the media. But am I right to say that the same organization also classified pickled vegetables as possibly carcinogenic to humans?
Yes.
How did
they
they
have
come
a
about?
category. They have class A, one carcinogen, which is known human carcinogen. Then they have, and that includes smoking and asbestos and arsenic and few other compounds. Then they have possible carcinogen. Okay, then they have probable carcinogen, which is a class unto itself, and then they have possible carcinogen, which has about 260 odd agents in it. Many of them are chemicals. And, but that class also includes coffee. It includes DDT.
I keep telling you, Chris, stop drinking coffee.
Coffee does not cause cancer.
And so forth.
It's possible. There's a possible link.
So,
be quiet.
That's what he's
so
saying.
what does possible mean? Well, the problem with the classification scheme is that there's no category for we have solid evidence that this doesn't seem to be related to cancer. That's the problem with the hierarchy.
They're missing a category.
And the EPA has such a category.
Yeah. Huh. Maybe the two
They
should
don't have
talk.
it. So they're sort of primed to file things away under one of these categories.
Isn't it somewhat ludicrous, though, to have Wi-Fi and cell phones in the same category as pickled vegetables and talcum powder? Because it just seems a little bit ridiculous to me, and I don't understand why the World Health Organization would do this.
It comes back to epidemiology. Epidemiology studies associations. Yeah. Associations are not effects.
Mm-hmm. No, they can be random.
There are many ways in which things can be correlated or associated, and it takes a lot of work over many years to establish, in most cases, that something is actually a cause.
Right.
And it took decades to really convince the population that smoking was a cause of lung cancer. In 1950, nobody believed that.
Well, for instance,
States.
Chris and I are associated, but I wouldn't infer anything from that.
That's right. There's actually a very strong correlation between the age of Miss America and the number of deaths by strangulation in the U.S. every year.
And I think it's causative. I mean, those numbers look very convincing to me. But right now, in 2015, what does the best evidence tell us about the health effects of cell phone use?
Well, there's a huge amount of evidence. It involves human studies, epidemiologic studies, which IARC, International Agency, gave the highest consideration to the human studies, but then there are animal studies and all sorts of laboratory studies in petri dishes and so forth. So these different frequency, because people have chosen in experiments to look at different frequencies, together with the human data, really overwhelmingly show no consistent signal that exposure to microwaves or radio frequency is having, that it's having, causing cancers.
There are people who claim to have a specific sensitivity to electromagnetic radiation. What are your thoughts on this? You can't swear, but you can go as far as.
Okay, it's called electromagnetic hypersensitivity syndrome, but now it's gotten a new name.
Yes,
idiopathic je ne sais quoi,
electromagnetic something. Yeah, it's 3 letters.
And, right.
6 letters, it's an acronym, yes.
So, well, it turns out when you do studies, and before I came up here from New York, I printed out some of the larger relevant overviews of this question. It turns out that when you take people who have the complaint, who say that they're sensitive to these Wi-Fi fields, and then you take controls who don't have that complaint, none of them can tell when the field is on or when the field is off.
Would Chris, would you guys dismiss their symptoms? What's happening there, do you think?
I think a lot of times people can have symptoms. I mean, people have, these are very vague, non-specific symptoms. They're fatigued, they have aches, they have pains.
I'm sure they have chronic Lyme disease.
Yes, don't get me started on that one, but...
send hate mails to
Send hate mail to christopher.labos@mail.mcgill.ca, as so many other people have done. We have to understand something. A lot of times people have these very vague symptoms, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's caused by the fad du jour. I mean, these people may be suffering from a variety of conditions. They may just be, sleep deprived, as many people in society are today. They may have very mild forms of arthritis. So people like to have very neat, pat explanations for their symptoms, and oftentimes life is a lot more complicated.
Yeah. In 2013, a 10-year-old by the name of Ethan Wyman died from a brain tumor in New Zealand. His father says he was diagnosed with the tumor 4 months after being given a Wi-Fi connected iPod, which he would keep under his pillow while sleeping. His parents wanted Wi-Fi removed from the school as a precautionary measure. We've seen similar cases in North America, notably at a public school near Toronto. Is there any science behind this claim that Wi-Fi could be carcinogenic?
Well, it goes back to studying the level of energy put out by these things, and these a Wi-Fi router puts out about 1 watt of power, and
compared to a light bulb, which is 100 times more powerful.
I think we should remove all light bulbs from school as a precautionary measure.
So coincidences are going to happen. I mean, bad things are going to happen, and you can imagine the father of this child and his desire to come up with an explanation. We don't have good explanations for, we don't know very much about causes of brain cancer. So,
is brain cancer becoming more common, as some people have started to claim? Are we seeing a spike in brain cancer that we could maybe attribute to cell phones and Wi-Fi?
Let me put it this way. Some people in Denmark are convinced that there are spikes, and in some other places. But in every developed country that has well-collected data on cancer, the occurrence of cancer, Scandinavia, the UK, the US, other European countries, Australia, brain cancer, which is a very rare disease, rates have remained flat over the past 30 years, which includes during the past 20 years, you've seen this incredible
So what you're saying is that the Danes need to start doing a better job at collecting data.
I knew we could never trust those Danes.
Yeah, I know. They gave us Hamlet. So I guess we could say, don't fear the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, don't fear the Wi-Fi.
Don't fear the Wi-Fi.
Don't fear the Wi-Fi. Don't fear the Wi-Fi.
All right, that was Dr. Geoffrey Kabat. Thank you very much. Stick around just for a few more seconds. Our last segment today has to do with genetically modified foods. So
I don't want to worry you, but I'm out of water.
Is it genetically modified water?
I don't know. We'll
Because
have to ask our next guest.
Okay, yeah, we shall.
Okay.
That water, by the way, tastes really good. I don't know what's different about it. I mean, it's just like if I just take a sip.
Must have something to do with the mug.
I don't know.
And the
I don't
logo
know.
on the
Which
mug.
camera's on right now? I don't know if, but this is good water. I don't know what's happening here. But we sent our street correspondent Thanos Michaelopoulos to the McGill University campus to ask students about their thoughts on GMOs.
Let's start talking about GMOs. Do you?
Okay, I know less about GMOs than I do about vaccines.
That's fine. It might be funnier then.
Oh,
Do you?
great. When I was living with my parents were very conscious to buy, organic, grass-fed, non-GMO, all that sort of stuff. They were really, really conscious of that. I personally don't have the money to be as smart of a consumer.
I just there's also some ignorance involved. People don't know the exact science going. When you say oh, we're chopping up your food and putting chemicals or switching genes around, people get afraid because they don't know what is going down on a molecular level exactly.
The corporations that control GMOs, namely Monsanto, right? Which I did a research project on them, and they are honestly quite terrible. I don't know if you know.
I think they're actually the corporation in the next Iron Man movie.
Is that true? I don't know if no, because they might as well have been, because they're completely evil.
Yeah.
And the way that the systems that they put into place to make sure that no one else has enough footing in the GMO worlds, it's really terrible. They have certain regulations. I'm not quite sure exactly which regulations are, and I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I'm pretty sure they in the contracts that they make the farmers sign, they state that you cannot use any extra seeds, right, for the next year. Yeah. You have to come back and buy it, right? Also, if you are found with GMO seeds and you haven't bought the GMO seeds, you get sued.
Do you have any health concerns? If I handed you an apple and said, hey, this is genetically modified, would
I eat it?
Would you eat it?
No. I wouldn't eat it because I don't know in what way it's been genetically modified.
Okay. No health concerns with you turning into some jellyfish?
No. No, that's not something I worry about on any basis at all. The politics behind them. That's my main issue, is that you have companies that can control a huge portion of production and development of products and then corner a market and push out small farmers. And
GMOs could actually are basically the same thing as the all natural crossbreeds in some ways, right?
Yeah.
It's just in a more sterile environment. We're also conditioned to think that all natural means totally safe.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. There are some substances that will kill you if you eat them, right?
Yeah, but it's all natural.
Yeah, but it's all natural.
Yeah. I guess that shows how misconstrued this all is, So would I eat it? I guess on the off the bat, yeah, I would eat it.
Okay.
But if I give it more thought, then maybe I would also eat GMOs. Maybe you swayed my opinion.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not here to do that.
If there was a thing of carrots that said no GMOs, and there was a thing of carrots that said GMOs very clearly, and they were the same price, I would obviously choose the one with no GMOs. I would obviously choose the organic option, that kind of thing, to answer your question very simply.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about corporations coming in and branding Bugs Bunny and all the carrots that he's eating now.
Really? That's a thing?
No, it's not a thing, but it would be horrible. I love Bugs Bunny.
Would it ruin it for you?
Yeah, it would.
I'm so sorry.
Bugs Bunny's selling out.
I'm so selling out.
Yeah.
And we are joined by Dr. Kevin Folta, professor and chairman of the Horticultural Sciences Department at the University of Florida, frequent science communicator on the topic of genetically modified organisms, and this close to hiring a bodyguard. Dr. Folta, you have been called an online troll by the Food Babe, a Monsanto whore by an anonymous poster on Craigslist, an aggressive biotech proponent by Eric Lipton of the New York Times, An Academic Prostitute by Mike Adams of Natural News, and Despicable by Dr. Taleb of NYU. Why are you so despicable, Dr. Folta, and where are your minions?
It's a really good question. I'm just a kid who grew up loving science, who had parents who really promoted that, who was lucky enough to work with the best faculty in the world at a great university, who chose to study recombinant DNA technology and really understand that. And if you had to define one thing that made this one watershed, is where I decided to step into the local organic market where I was buying my vegetables and say, you guys are getting this wrong with this GMO thing, can we talk about it? And they gave me a really great opportunity to talk about it in their community room, and I started to communicate more on the topic. And so it's been—
What happened in the past 6 months or so that led to the list of things that I just read?
Well, it's what you're talking about in the last 6 months has been building for 15 years. I've been talking to the public in a way they understand to help demystify what this technology is and isn't, what are the risks and benefits. And folks have been trying to knock me down a peg for a long time. Now, an activist organization funded by the Organic Consumers Association confiscated 3 years of email. And when you get 4,600 pages of email from somebody, you can assemble any story you want. It's like, monkeys at a typewriter. You can put together a story that can damn somebody very well.
Did they find Shakespeare in your email?
They didn't, not yet. But there are more FOIA requests coming.
Good.
From everyone from the food babe to average guys on the street are now asking for my emails in an attempt to identify some hidden secret.
And they can legally do this?
Yes.
What's the argument?
Well, it's freedom of information.
Okay.
I'm a public employee. My words are public property, and they can have them. The problem is that we have an abuse with that transparency, is that when I'm glad to give it over, people then can reassemble it in ways that they want and then use it against me to make me the despicable whore that you've talked about earlier.
Right. Nothing wrong with being a despicable whore.
You're one every day of your life.
Oh, thank you. The love that is emanating from this guy is just too much to handle. What do you do in your research? Like, putting aside science communication for now, what do you do in your research?
Oh, my research is really cool. We study ways to use non-chemical treatments of light, different narrow bandwidths of light. So using the red, far red, the stuff that's on the electromagnetic.
Ionizing or non-ionizing?
This is non-ionizing radiation.
Good.
But really interesting that it does interact with biological substances in ways that we can prolong shelf life, change flavors, change nutrition. And then we study the way that different genes contribute to the flavors of strawberries and small fruits.
So you mentioned flavors. It's very interesting. Has something happened to food flavors in the past few decades?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Breeders have prioritized shipping quality, yields, disease resistance, fruit size, perfect shape, at the expense of flavors and sensory qualities. And so we lost them through traditional breeding, and now we're using traditional breeding to bring them back. But before you can traditionally breed those genes back in, you have to understand what they are. And we live in a state right now where we can, in a time when we can use genomics tools. So we're using high-end DNA sequencing, RNA sequencing to identify the genes that underlie those sensory components. And the next fruits are going to be much better.
I want to ask you a question, because people have no problems with gene therapy to treat diseases in humans. But when you try to use gene therapy to treat diseases in plants, they lose their minds. Do you have any idea why that's the case? Because it's baffled me for as long as I've been around.
It's just as good of a question as to
He's
why—
only been around for 12 years, though, so
yeah,
that's not saying much.
That's pretty good.
I'm actually only 16 years old.
Wow, that's good.
You're holding up
He
well.
still gets carded.
But if you go back to 1983, one of the craziest genetic modifications came into the human market. And
Yeah,
is where
Chris.
Yeah.
Well,
81, but yeah.
that too. It's where you took a gene from humans and put it into a bacterium.
Yeah.
And then you grew vats of the bacterium to produce that human protein that then would be injected in the humans. And we made insulin through recombinant DNA technology.
Was there a lot of pushback?
None. I mean, virtually none. And nobody really cared. No one got upset when we could make growth hormones, so we didn't have to harvest it from pituitary glands of cadavers. Chemotherapeutic agents all come through human genes and microbes, and that's fine. But if you take a plant gene and you turn that plant gene put it in a plant, that's something that maybe we could do by breeding if we had 1,000 years. Breeding trees takes a long time. We could do it, but we don't do those things because of the pushback. And that's the sad part is all the things that we can't do that would really help the environment, that would help farmers, help the needy. We can't do those things because of the fear of the technology.
Right now, if I go to a grocery store in North America, which foods are genetically modified?
All of them.
Well,
Go ahead.
It's actually
I'm not asking you, I'm
Yeah.
asking the expert.
Okay, sure. I'll just sit here quietly then.
Yeah, just, there are seats at the front, Chris, over there.
It's actually kind of funny. There's really just 4 products that you commonly come in touch with, and that's corn, soy, canola, and corn, soy, canola, and
corn soy.
Corn soy,
which is a new hybrid.
I'm blanking because I'm on the spot, but it's essentially corn, soy, canola, and one other one.
A mystery ingredient.
But papayas.
Let's go to a grocery store and find out.
It'll come to me in a second. Sugar beets.
Sugar beets.
So sugar from sugar beets. And it's all these little bits of additives, like the little bit of sugar, the sprinkle of corn syrup or corn starch or high fructose corn syrup. Those come through likely transgenic or genetically engineered crops. There's some small acreage of papaya, small acreage of squash, but in general, you're talking about just the products from those plants. Most of the acres go towards animal feed or fuels. So it's a renewable fuel. So not that much gets into human products, but little sprinkles get into about 70% of what's on our grocery store shelves.
And as we know, there's very little corn or soy in most of our food supply these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you're buying prepackaged stuff. A common argument we hear against GMOs is that farmers have to buy the seeds from a company like, for instance, Monsanto every year. Is this a valid argument?
Well, it's a valid argument. It's true.
Okay.
But the question came from, but that's been happening in corn since 1923. Corn companies became very bit large because you could sell a hybrid, which was a combination between 2 very different plants that when you cross-pollinated, gave you something that was much better. Then the next generation, for those of you who are into genetics, the next generation, if that self-pollinates, some parents will look like the one or the other or a mixture in between, and you lose the consistency that you get with that really robust hybrid.
So you always have to go back to the original seeds.
You had to go back to the company who owns those parents, who gives you that bag of hybrids. And that was a technology that's been with us for a long time, and why the corn industry just exploded. Now that they have biotechnology, they can license these individual traits, which take between, say, 5 and 13 years, and between $5 and $130 million to develop. And they made a deal with farmers, essentially, in the beginning with cotton that said, we're either going to sell you this first bag of cotton for $140,000, and then you can do with it what you want, or we can recoup our R&D costs by charging a premium every year we sell it. And the vast majority of farmers said, yeah, we'd rather just pay as we go.
You recently accepted funds from Monsanto to finance your science communication endeavors. You were quoted as saying, whoever wants to fund me to talk about GMOs, I'll take it, right? Would you now, if you had to do it again, would you accept funds from industry for your science education knowing what happened?
That's a really tough question because I think they did the right thing. I've been talking to the public about science for 15 years. And in the New York Times, they say to defend genetically engineered. No, I talk about science. And I talk about the facts, and I talk about what's in the literature, and I talk about the good things and the bad things, and the strengths and the limitations. We talk about science. And so the fact that they wanted to have somebody promoting more science seemed to be like a good idea. It's only when, since Monsanto is such a lightning rod, that people went nuts. Syngenta gives money to our department for organic research, and nobody cares.
Why is it's always Monsanto, but there are other companies out there. They don't get demonized quite as much as Monsanto.
Well, there's 6 companies that make biotech products.
They must be very happy to not be named Monsanto.
I oftentimes wonder if Dow is behind all of this, because as long as you can keep your competition wearing the devil horns, you're looking pretty good.
Right. Are graduate students that are working on genetically modified organisms scared about what this may mean for their lives and their careers, given what's happened to you recently?
Oh wow, I don't know that one's working on genetically modified organisms, but I know graduate students who want to talk about science have said they will never go into public institutions. And it's breaking my heart because I want to raise communicators and I want to raise a generation of scientists that want to talk to the public and engage and get out from behind the computer in the lab. And they want to go to industry. One student sent me an email and said, I followed your work forever, I'd love to come to work with you for grad school, but would my emails be part of a public record? And I said, yeah, they are now. Next time, call. But it was really sad because these are students who we need to be cultivating, and we need to be encouraging them to share science. But right now, the activist movement has realized this tool that you can use for intimidation and harassment of scientists is a very powerful one, and one that they're getting tremendous traction, just in my case alone.
Has the criticism of GMOs shifted? 'Cause it used to be that GMOs were going to produce corn that was self-aware and or give you cancer. And you don't seem to hear that as much anymore. There's very few people going out there and claiming that GMOs are going to cause cancer or give you autism or make you sick. And the arguments seem to have shifted again, towards these economic arguments, the environmental arguments about pesticides. Has the debate shifted from what you've seen over the past 15 years?
I think so. I think that people are finally realizing that they can't go after the technology for a couple reasons. One is that although the companies are using the technology to make a buck, guys like me want to use that technology to protect the environment. We want to feed people in the developing world. We want to solve problems that we all care about. And we can do that. But activists are standing in our way. And this public sentiment against the technology blocks my ability to deploy a technology that can limit fungicide application on Florida strawberries with a gene from strawberry. I mean, we have that technology. We'll never even begin to deploy it. I think that the shift is also based on some of the realistic concerns. There are concerns about weed resistance, about insect resistance. These were predicted, and they're coming true, as we thought. But we need new mechanisms around that, and we need to think about ways to solve those problems, not run from them. And that's exactly what activists are trying to do, is say, look at these little hints of problems here, we have to stop now. When really I'm saying we got to run into that burning building, solve those problems, and save some people.
Well, thank you very much. We usually end on a pithy jingle to help people remember the takeaway message, but we thought we'd make an exception. Given the number of ad hominem attacks perpetrated against you recently, we thought you might enjoy a little ballad. And so here is Joseph Hackle with the Ballad of Kevin Folta.
Oh no.
This is the ballad of Kevin Folta, transparent with his data to a Folta. Monsanto only paid for his students' pasta. Let's hit him for his emails like a piñata. Kevin, that FYI request is just a crude weapon. Mass hysteria against science is what they're selling. In the end, it'll be done like a genetically modified lemon. Unless genetically modified lemons work, in which case, thank heaven.
Not too
This is the ballad of Kevin Folta, when a face-off would win against John Travolta.
Dr. Kevin Folta, ladies and gentlemen, and that takes us to the end of our show. I just want to say a few thanks. Thank you to Thanos Michaelopoulos, our comedian. Thanks to Joseph Hackle, whom you just heard, our jingle meister. You can find him at voodoojazz.ca. Big thanks to Dr. Paul Offit, Dr. Geoffrey Kabat, Dr. Kevin Folta, the crew at Centre Mont-Royal with all the technology and the Wi-Fi signals and everything. Thank you so much. Of course, Dr. Joe Schwartz, Lauren Trottier, and Emily Shore, the fantastic Emily Shore, who's made all of this happen. Thank you so much. Our theme music is Troll of the Mountain Swing by the _ Orchestra. The Body of Evidence is a Moutons No More production. Moutons No More is a local production team that brings critical thinking in a way that is entertaining. And you can find our podcast and so much more at bodyofevidence.ca. Chris, final words?
I think you summed it up beautifully, man.
That's it?
That's
That's all you got to say?
Do you want me to say more?
Yeah.
I can do a 15-minute speech if you want.
No,
I have nowhere to go.
We have 30 seconds.
We have like 4 hours to go until the symposium
I
tonight.
know,
I can
but
talk for 4 hours. I got no problems.
I'd rather not.
I love the sound of my own voice.
I know you do.
I'm cool with this.
Yeah, actually, you don't like the sound of your voice. What did you think of the mugs?
I love the mugs.
I like the mugs too.
All right, good.
Next time we'll give you a mug, Dr. Folta.
All right.
Next time. Thank you and goodbye.